Hey guys, I'm going to do a video on doing valve springs while head is on, just to show you guys how I recommend doing them. It's not really rocket science. I'm not going to do all of them. This is just I'm doing it just to show you guys, so I'm just going to do it on the one cylinder, just so you guys can see how I do it. And anyways, let's get after it. Okay guys, what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you guys how to change valve springs on a 12 valve. Well, the engine is in the truck or is assembled, I guess. It's obviously not in the truck, but just for simplicity's sake, that's why I got this old test mule here, I guess you'd say, so that I can show you guys and the easy. So it's show you easy, right? So valve cover. Usually you're going to have a tin cover over top of this. I want to say that it's 17 mil for those. These ones are 15 mil. So we'll take a trusty impact gun here. Now something to for you guys to note, if you're doing this, buy valve cover gaskets because they usually leak after, and these ones have gone hard, so I'm sure they leak. But something that I did want to show you guys, because I've had a couple guys, and I actually got a guy that I have to do one of these up for, that we built an engine for, and one got stripped. But anyways, you want to watch. This is a shouldered bolt, and if this hole gets oil or something in it, when lots of times they do, if you're monkeying around, you want to make sure, one, you don't hydrolock it. Two, these are cast. So if you tighten this bolt in there, all the way, it literally stops. And when you stop with it, I don't recommend using an impact gun when you're tightening them. Okay, I do, but don't do as I do, because I've stripped some. If you use a wrench, there again, 15 mil, not a metric round all. You literally just need to give it like that much. That's it. Because it's a shouldered bolt and it has load from this. It does not have to be super tight. So literally, I don't know how many foot-pounds. Let's say 25 foot-pounds. I don't even need that much or not. 25 foot-pounds is about the right torque for an 8, or is it torque for 8 mil? So let's say 25 foot-pounds if you actually want to torque them. But you want to make sure that it's bottomed out. So if it's not bottomed out, they will leak, or a pretty good chance to leak. Usually they'll leak. So now if you're doing this, so what I do with them, so we're at top dead center. I personally, I always do top dead center to start with, because that is going to be top dead center on number 1, number 6. The next pair I bring up is 2 and 5, and then and then after that you're 3 and 4. So the easiest way to tell whether your piston is all the way up, and you want to make sure your piston is all the way up, obviously. The easiest way to do it, first thing you got to do is you need to take your rocker pedestal off, which is a 13. If you don't have studs, well, if you have studs, you're going to have valve springs, I imagine. You should. So, pull your bolt out of the middle, which is 13. Head stud. Now when you're putting these back in, usually there's going to be oil in the bottom, but brake clean it off, blow the hole out, 1 drop of oil. Same with on this, brake clean it off, brake clean the hole out, 1 drop of oil. What I would recommend doing is 110, at least 110. I usually go to 125, but I don't recommend 125 because sometimes bolts break. 110, and you should do a retorque. If you got all this apart, do a retorque on your head bolts. So 110 foot-pounds on all of them. So you get these pulled out, and you're going to take your pedestal off. So we get your pedestal off, and for this instance, you should keep these in order, because if you don't have them in order, you really should do a valve set after you do this anyway, but per se, they technically are war to the valve, war to the push rod. So just put them back in the same spot. Argument saved there for now. We'll get into that another time. So this is the tool for taking your valve springs off. Now again, this is a Torque Technologies one. There is more than one. There's more than one company that make them. I will there again have them on the website. So you just drop it down inside there. Now when you're putting 60-pound valve springs in here, let's get you guys in a better spot here so you can see maybe a little bit better. If you're doing this and you're putting 60-pound valve springs, the tool is hard to pull out when you're doing 60-pound valve springs, but it's not that hard to pull out. And I'm not going to put 60-pound valve springs on this because we're just going to be ripping it back apart anyway. But so the tool in there, make sure you oil this. I recommend putting oil or some sort of lubrication on this every time you go up and down. WD-40, maybe not the best thing, but that's what I got sitting right there. But it works just fine. I've done that hundreds of times. So you just wind the nut back down. Now, like I said, we're at top dead center. Now, if you're doing this there again with a barring tool, the engine will have a very hard time moving around. But when you're doing this, you want to make sure that the engine doesn't roll over. So, and this will actually give you another instance whether it'll tell you whether you do have the piston in the right spot. Because if you don't have the piston in the right spot, the valve is just going to go down. It's just going to go down inside the hole, and the capers and the retainers and all that stuff are going to stay there. So, not a bad idea. Like, this is kind of a double test, I guess you would say. So you want to make sure the engine doesn't roll over, and maybe we should be doing this. Usually, I would recommend doing this with a ratchet. It just gives you a little bit more feel. But so you can see where it's actually. I don't know if you guys will be able to see there. I'll try to zoom in, but if you watch, you can see the retainers and the keepers actually moving. So it's that easy. I recommend for doing this, you want to have a you know, like a little magnet. You can pull your keepers out. And usually they'll pull out pretty easily unless there's something funky going on. Make sure you don't drop these in the engine because that's a bad day. We'll just throw them in the valve cover there for now. And then, now, I'll pull that off, put your new springs on. If you're in there, I would recommend doing seals. The seals are easy, just pull them off, push them back on. If you're having a hard time, you want to make sure they're seated all the way, and I recommend if you're going to use the factory style seals, brake clean everything up, make sure everything's good and dry when you put the seals on. Put the new seal on and make sure that it's down all the way, because if it isn't, it'll pop off on you. So make sure it's down all the way. So you get that all done, and if you do, after you brake clean that, something that I would recommend is just take one little drop of oil, put it on the valve stem, drop oil on the valve stem. So that oil migrates down inside the valve guide so that when you do a first startup, it's not starting up dry, but at the same time, the seal surface itself is still dry. So anyways, you're gonna put your new springs on. So our new springs, and then put your retainers back in. Like I said, I would, if you were doing this on your own, I would, have everything set out, brake clean everything off, or wash it, Varsol, however you're washing stuff. You can Varsol clean stuff and then brake clean it a little bit if you don't want to use lots of brake clean. I personally, we have a jet wash, so I can jet wash stuff. But anyways, you get that in there. So you're going to take your tool back again here. Get that on there. Give it a little. There again, I like lube. Lube's your friend. You can use oil. You can use all kinds of stuff. I just WD-40 it there. So you're going to go past where your retainer lock or retainer groove is. Not retainer groove, sorry, lock groove. Keepers, whatever you want to call them. Some people call them locks, some people call them retainers. There again, you want to make sure this stuff's clean. You just drop them down in there. 12 valves are really easy because the retainers are big. 24 valves aren't quite as easy because the retainers are smaller. But nonetheless, they're not a big deal. Just, you know, with the 24 valve, there's twice as much of everything. So you can just line this up, make sure that you get them in the right spot. Now there will always be, and it doesn't matter, some guys will argue with me, but it doesn't matter. That sometimes you on the keeper you'll have more of a space on one side than the other. Doesn't matter. The keepers will migrate around if there's spaces, because the groove itself is actually a little bit too big. I shouldn't say the retainer, or the keepers are a little bit too big, and the reason they actually do that is so that if they wear, they don't actually touch, because if they touch and they wear, they'll actually fall out. So that's actually the reason that there's a space. So if there isn't a space, it's not really good. When you get into high performance ones, the locks are made out of much better material, and the retainers are much better material, and that stuff doesn't wear, or shouldn't wear. So just pull that back out. We're gonna pull this out. Get your tool out of the way, and like I said, you kind of have to wiggle that back and forth when you're pulling that out when you're doing 60 pounders. If you're doing real like heavy duty valve springs, there is actually a different one, but it works nonetheless. There is actually a different one that has smaller, these holes are smaller. The reason for that is because the retainer is actually too small to go in here. It falls through. So anyways, so now you got it to that point. Now something that I recommend, being that you know the valve is not touching the piston, what I do, and you should, you know, you can use a little hammer or a dead blow, is just tap the corner of the retainer a little bit. And all that's going to do, and you can top the valve a little bit too. You don't have to hit very hard, but what that's going to do is that's going to make sure that everything is seated. And if it's not seated, like if you got something funky going on or something like that, or if they don't look right, you tap them lots of times and they'll come in. And if they're not in the right spot, they'll actually usually shoot out of there. Not too often you get them to shoot out, but I can tell you one thing, you would rather it shoot out right now than when you start it, because if it does it when it starts, it's you put a new engine in the car. Well, maybe not a new engine, but you're gonna definitely have to take cylinder head off. So now, as I'm throwing shit around again. So now we got that done. So you are going to, I recommend doing these one at a time. Just because I don't like unloading all the all of the head studs myself personally. There again, to each his own. You want to make sure there again, 1 drop of oil, the holes are clean. 1 drop of oil, the holes clean. $25 foot-pounds. And that one you want to do at 110. If you're brave, you can go to 125. Do the old click, and we're good there. So, like I said, new valve cover gaskets. There again for this engine, we're not doing that. Put the valve cover back on. I really wish I knew where. Oh, there it is, right in front of me. Now there is something else that I wanted to show you. Now that I found it, there is an O-ring. This O-ring is kind of messed up, but you want to. The valve cover gaskets aren't going to come with that O-ring. I don't know why they don't. The rebuild kits do, but you want to replace this O-ring. And if you don't replace the O-ring, and that's fine, put a little dab of case sealant or RTV in there, because otherwise you'll get a little bit of seeping. So, which there again, isn't the end of the world, but just, you know, these things leak bad enough. So any leaks that you can stop on them is not a horrible thing. In my eyes, anyway. So, like I said, so you can feel it, literally, you can see it stop, right? Stopped right there. You just want to be, I don't even know, no, it wouldn't even be a 1/4 of a turn. A 1/16 of a turn is lots. That's all you got to do. And that wraps it up. So, you know, you're going to do that. You're going to do number 1 and 6. You're going to do 2 and 4. And then 3 and 4, or sorry, 2 and 5, 3 and 4. That whole process, the same on all of them. Check your valve lash, which is going to be 10 and 20, which I did a video on. Yes, I did. I did do a video on. So check that video out if you want to know how to do the valve lash. And yeah, anyways, that's it for this one, guys. I appreciate you watching. Like and subscribe, and hit me up in the comments if you got any comments.